Hello.
Hello and welcome to the Peace for the World series. And today I'm here with Judy Sedgeman, and I was intrigued to ask her to come on the show when I read an article by her called War and Peace. And so I asked her if she wants to come, and she was happy to be here. So hello,
Yeah.
Judy.
Hello, and it's a pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about peace, which is so lacking and so critically important to the next generation of children that are wandering the world displaced and sad. So I'm, and I was really happy to hear that you had read that blog because I got quite a bit of comment about it because, of course, to me, the most important aspect of finding peace is you got to find it for yourself, inside yourself first. And then when you find peace within, it's easier to see the potential for peace elsewhere. And the difficulty, I think, is we live in a very insecure world right now where people do not feel at peace and are feeling very threatened and insecure and troubled and and are having trouble coming to peace with the realities of life and so on. So, yeah, I don't know what questions you might have, but happy to, I'm happy to talk about it in any way you'd like.
Yeah, I would like to start with something from the news. So, for example,
Okay.
let's take the IS, the terrorism,
Yeah.
and I would love to have your perspective on what you think that people or which states people are in so that they hurt people and that they kill other people. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in my experience, you have to look at it as a matter of degrees. So when people are not at peace within themselves, when they're feeling insecure or threatened or desperate to cling to their own kind of ideals and feel very threatened by people who don't agree with them. In business, it shows up as people that are obstinate and block things at meetings and won't entertain new ideas and don't cooperate and don't do teamwork very well. And as people deteriorate down the spectrum of insecurity, um, the behavioral options that look okay to them get more and more ridiculously violent. So, the same, but it's the same mental state. So the thing that causes someone to have an inappropriate outburst at a meeting or insult somebody or uh, just walk away from a discussion, that same intuitive feeling of insecurity and I've got to be right and I'm losing my grip here, I'm losing control. If it escalates, it can lead to, so you're going to start punching people out and get into fights. And then if it keeps escalating, the next thing you know, it looks perfectly normal to behead your enemies. And I think we don't realize that this is not that this is a product of how people use their thinking and how they're taught to use their thinking and how they come to see themselves. It scares me the amount of effort they're putting into training young children because they're really training them to be insecure and afraid and exert power over others as a substitute for connecting with others. Um, but that's really it's a state of mind issue, and I think that the failure to realize that the world is so determined to divide us into good and evil,
Hmm.
and when what we call evil, and I'm not saying it isn't horrifying because I'm not in any way defending it, but what we call evil is a person in such a tormented state over their own fear of powerlessness and insecurity about their place in life and how they're ever going to have a sense of control and autonomy, that anything looks normal to them. Anything they can do to keep themselves in power looks fine. And we've certainly, over history, I mean, you can see example. It's been going on from the beginning of time. It's just right now, this is the phenomenon that we're looking at. So I look at that and I feel very, I feel very sad that the world seems to think that return violence is the answer. So what we do is if somebody's killing me, then I'm just going to kill more of them, and then eventually one of us will have fewer people left, and that'll be the end of it. And that's just so out of sync with the spiritual well-being of people. Because you can't bomb insecurity away. It just creates more insecurity. So it's like I think of it in terms of this is a terribly trivial example, but it works for me. So years ago, I had a neighbor. I love cats, and so I had this darling kitten. I moved into a new neighborhood with my husband, and we had this adorable little kitten that a friend had given me, and it was so sweet, and it loved sitting outside in the sun. And of course, if you let a cat sit outside, it'll wander around a little bit, but it didn't go too far. Went into my neighbors' yards, but I could always sort of see it. If I called it, it would come home. So I used to let it go out. And I had a neighbor on one side of me who hated cats, and he thought the cats were, pooping in his yard, and he really hated cats. And so I told him, look, I honestly, it's just a kitten. I can't really keep her inside. I'll try to be outside with her and make sure she doesn't go into your yard if I can. So I tried, but every once in a while she would scamper off. And so I came out one day. He yelled. First he yelled at the cat, and then he would go after the cat with a broom. And then he started yelling at me, and then he threatened to punch out my husband. He came over and he was very threatening. And then he poisoned my cat. He did. And he was proud of it. So I'm telling you that he did it because he told me that he did it. I found the cat dead on our property line, which was a clue. And it was inexplicable why this cat would be dead. And we went to pick her up and bury her. And he came out on his back porch and he said, I told you I was going to find a way to get rid of that cat. Now, to me, that's a metaphor for what happens to people when they get increasingly upset and insecure, and they have to be right. And they have no room at all for compassion or generosity of spirit or understanding someone else's point of view. And I just didn't see it coming because I was so naive. I couldn't believe anybody would ever poison an innocent little animal. I mean, I'd really never seen that before. And, but now that I've been involved in the three principles for a while, I really understand what was going on in his mind. He was a troubled, lonely, old man who was living alone in a neighborhood which was increasingly being taken over by younger families with children and pets and laughter and barbecues and things that he found troubling because he wasn't part of them. And I often think back and I wonder, if instead of just kind of ignoring him or brushing him off or doing my best to just say, look, I'll do what I can, if I had invited him over, I often think that, what if I had invited him over for dinner? What if we made some effort to include him in our lives rather than just thinking, oh, he's just a grumpy old neighbor, we just didn't make any effort at all to get to know him. And now with what I understand about life now and the way I think about life now, I think I'm always inclined to try to befriend people that are unreasonably inimical to me. All right, there's some people that are just going to disagree, and they're disagreeable in the way they disagree, but they're not escalating. But, the thing is that what people really need is love and understanding, and it's what we don't give. And because we get frightened, and I know that sounds Pollyanna. I know that. I totally get that it sounds Pollyanna, but I also know that on a one-to-one basis in life, it always works if you can find a way to try to listen and understand another person rather than getting into an escalating, ugly, confrontational situation with them. And that's what's missing in the world. We don't teach children that. We don't practice it. And we don't understand it. We don't understand the beauty and the value of love and understanding. It's been troubling to me to watch this play out, in this negotiation with Iran over nuclear weapons. So, we happen to have a president right now who is inclined to talk to people, and who rightfully says, "What's the point of negotiating with your friends? You already agree with your friends. You negotiate with your enemies because you're trying to reach some different level of communication and understanding." So he's banking on the idea that if you open a door and you create a reasonable compromise, that it allows you to take another step and another step and another step, and to communicate and talk to people who otherwise are just sworn enemies, and all you can do really is bomb them. I mean, that's her choice. Now, to me, it makes perfect sense that a person would do that, that a nation would do that. That we would say, look, it's not that we could wipe them off the face of the planet, but what would that, what's the point of that? Why not try to have some kind of human understanding? And you look at the videos from within that country, and you realize there are a lot of young people, a lot of people just living their lives, and they don't have all this higher political thinking about enemies and friends. They just want to get along in the world and do well and meet other people and travel and see the world. And I think, that some recognition that this might open the door to that and change the way that the whole culture thinks about other cultures is possible. And if it isn't, you can always bomb them out of the world. But, it's probably can't be the first option. And so to me, that's what I've come to understand with knowing how thought works and how the principles function in life. And the three principles of mind, thought, and consciousness, that once you see how powerful a thought can be and how the impetus to take our thinking seriously is innocent. Not that we do innocent things, but that once a thought grows huge in our minds, in an insecure state of mind, we can't see beyond it until we calm down. And the only thing that breeds calm is calm people being calm in the presence of other upset people. So.
And it makes so much sense. Before I knew the principles, like 5 years or 6 years ago, I was very insecure. Yeah. And it was a lot about comparing myself with others. Mm-hmm. And so I could lose in a way.
Yeah.
And now it's totally different. Some people, when I talk to them, they say, yeah, I know a lot of people that I don't like, or you can feel that there's some tension. And when I'm together with the same people, it's like they are just friendly, lovely, positive people. And I don't meet, I meet, for example, one person a month or so where I say, okay, I cannot get along. But with most of the people, it's just fine. It's fun.
Yeah. It's just being open to the fact they may disagree with you about their things they think about, but deep down, we're all just doing the same thing. We're making it up, and it looks real to us. I remember I taught in a missionary school on Okinawa during the Vietnam War, and there were kids from all over the Orient whose lives were just amazingly disrupted by what was going on at that time. And my husband was in the Air Force. I was a military wife, and that's the only job I could get was teaching school. And I chose to teach in a missionary school so I could teach children, not American children, learn to understand these other cultures. And I had a young girl in my 11th grade English class who was originally from North Vietnam. Her family had moved to South Vietnam before the war got bad because they felt they would be safer. They were going to be protected by the West. Then they sent her to Okinawa, which is where I was, to live with relatives because it was getting really bad, which it did. And my students, because it was an American school run by the School Sisters of Notre Dame, that we conformed to all these things American schools were doing. So like one of the things American schools do is that their students enter the Freedom Foundation essay contest every year. And it's supposed to be an essay about freedom. And of course, in the United States, it's always about the founding fathers and the Constitution. But we're not in the US, so it's just going to be about freedom. What does freedom mean to you? And in the essay, this girl wrote this very profound thing, which I've never forgotten. And she said, an enemy is just a friend you haven't made yet. And she talked about all these different people over the course of her very young life, just the children that she had met to play with in their families, that when she was in North Vietnam, the South Vietnamese and the French were her enemies. And then she moved to South Vietnam, and the South Vietnamese and the French were her friends. And then she moved to Okinawa, and the Americans, who were the enemies of the Vietnamese, were really were the enemies of all the Vietnamese, because we were burning their fields and napalming their babies, and it wasn't a very pretty thing. And she said, now I'm in an American school and I'm with people from all over, from China, from the Philippines, from Japan, and everybody is just wonderful. So I decided that an enemy is just a friend you haven't made yet. And I've never forgotten that, because that just touched my heart. Unfortunately, her essay did not win. Because, of course, we live in a world in which enemies are perceived to be real. But it was very, very touching and very, very sweet. And if that's the feeling behind peace, is just the understanding that just because these people don't really understand me and don't like what I do, and I don't really understand them and I wouldn't do what they do, doesn't mean that they're not doing the best they can, given how they think. And it doesn't mean they don't have the right to think what they want, because they do have the right to think what they want. And we would live at peace if everybody just left everybody else alone. We don't all have to agree to have peace. We don't all have to say, okay, fine, we're going to have this one thought system. Everybody's going to have that thought. We're all going to see it that way. Then we'll get along great, because that wouldn't make any difference. We just have to say, it's okay for people to live within their own world and think what they want to think and live their life. Because even when you talk about ISIS, I mean, they wouldn't be killing people if they didn't perceive that they had enemies. And the only reason they kill people is because they think they're the enemy. If they perceived that they were contained within their own world, doing their life the way they want to do it, and nobody cared, they wouldn't have any enemies, and they might moderate. They might just say, okay, fine, we'll have our little villages and we'll start. Then they might feel like, well, gee, maybe we should trade, because it's nice to be able to trade with the world. I mean, this is really what always happens. When you think about, you live long enough, you've seen a lot of war and peace, And, when I was born, we were at war with Germany and Japan, who are now two of our strongest allies.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's changed person to person. And the Japanese still have a very different culture from the American culture. And in Germany, while there are more similarities, it's still different. It's still a different. There are values and things that are more important in one place than in the other. Now, we're fine with that now, because we perceive that they're fine. They're our friends. And so, so they're okay to be different, but it wasn't okay when we thought we were not friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it's in the feeling. Peace is in the feeling you have for other people and the respect and dignity that you give them.
I just talked with my mom before we started this interview, and she asked about religions and if there would be peace if there could not be religions anymore.
Uh-huh. Well, that's a great question, isn't it? Well, I think that, my feeling about that is that religions are, if you look deeper than the religious structure, so what all religions have in common is that there is a universal human desire to express gratitude and awe for the things we don't understand, but we're grateful for, so we're alive, and we have no idea how that happened. It's like, wow, how did we get here? But you're really grateful to be alive, and it's a beautiful thing to be alive. So you look to say, well, there must be a creator, and thank you, creator, because here I am, And so religions they all start with the same beautiful spiritual impulse to find a way to express awe, gratitude, and reverence for the things that are beyond our knowledge. Now, and then what happens is people get attached to the form that they created for that expression and forget the expression. The expression was the point. So what all religions have in common, if you go, no matter where you go, no matter what, what gods or what figures or what structures or what dogma they believe in, that belief system was built in order to create a sort of a form that they could use to come together and express that beautiful spiritual feeling. If we go back to the beautiful spiritual feeling, there is no difference. Then we could say, well, it's just like saying, well, I have friends that would never let their hair go gray, and so I look at them and I think some women that are older look a little weird with like flaming red hair, but they love it, So big deal. I went gray. They didn't. I don't care. We're all old. That's what we have in common. We've been here for a while, so how we choose to express that, who cares? So it's like we're all spiritual. We're all spiritual beings. And how we choose to express that spirituality is just personal. It doesn't matter. But when you start thinking, well, I'm right and everybody else is wrong, that's the problem when you get an organized church, and then you get into questions of power and control and who's in charge and who's right and who's wrong, and is it evil or good? And those are judgments that are personal thinking of human beings, unrelated to the spiritual power that allowed them to think. If that makes sense.
Yeah. What I see now is what I have in mind is that, for example, Christianity. What you said is that we that we have this expression of gratitude. So we have gratitude, and so that's why we come together as Christians.
Yeah, or any
or any other religion. And now, for a lot of people, it seems like we come together to feel gratitude or whatever, or go the other way around to have this feeling.
Exactly. That we put the emphasis on the form instead of the formless. And then the form becomes important. Then you got to defend the form. Mm. As opposed to just going, like, this is how it'd be different. Like, I remember my aunt Ella May she was a wonderful baker. She really could bake pies. She used to love to go to these back in the day. She used to love to go to these like Betty Crocker get together things where the cooks would all come and they'd all taste each other's apple pie. And everybody had their own way to make an apple pie that they really thought was the right way. Like she had certain ways to roll the dough and certain seasonings that you put in the apples and certain ways you cut the apples. I mean, everybody has their own thinking about it. But when they would get together to taste each other's pies, they weren't looking to see what was wrong with the other person's pie. They were just they were curious. So what do other people do? How do they make their pies? Is there anything I could learn? Is there, it was fine. And she used to come back and say, I still like my pie the best, but by this other lady, and she did this thing with the crust, and she would be talking and talking. Now, personally, I could care less, but I'm not a baker. But I used to find it fascinating that she got such a kick out of it. And that's kind of how we could be about anything that people have made up and taken to be important. It's just like, that's interesting. So that's what you believe. Okay. All right. Well, that's fine for you. Maybe I don't see it that way, but so what? It's like what happens to me that makes religions awkward in the world is when either one religion thinks it's the one everybody should drop everything else and just do that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them feel that way. It's not just one. Or they're so sure that they're the chosen ones, that they're doing it the way God wanted them to do it, and nobody else understands that. So then obviously they're superior. And that's just personal thinking. That's ego thinking applied to what would otherwise be just pure thought of gratitude, reverence, and appreciation. That's the whole thing the principles teach us. If you go down, really, if you dig, the deeper you dig, the more you realize individual personal thinking is what makes us interesting to each other. But in an insecure state of mind, it makes us dangerous to each other. But that's not because it is intrinsically dangerous. It's because we think it is. When we're insecure, and if you're not insecure, you don't feel threatened by other people. That's just what it comes to. So I think it's important. I really do think the most important thing for peace to spread on earth is for individual people to find deep peace within themselves, not phony peace, not made up peace. I'm peaceful because I live in a certain area where people
Mm-hmm.
keep the peace. Peaceful because deep down inside, I really understand that I'm a spiritual being living in a body, and I can think anything, and so can anybody else. And whatever I think looks really important to me, but other people's thinking looks just as important to them. No biggie, because the common thread is the fact that we have this beautiful spiritual power to do that. We can make up anything. So if we can make up enemies, we can also make up friends. It's just a matter of seeing deeper to see where your thinking is coming from. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
I love the fact that you bring it back to that you can really make up everything and to, yeah, just look for friendship, for connection.
Yeah. And where we find that connection is just not being threatened by other people's realities. So that's it's all illusion. I mean, we're all making it up. It's like there's nothing more important about my reality than about yours. Mine happens to be mine, so I'm kind of like excited about it. But I don't care. I don't really care, to defend it. I could explain it all day long. I'm happy to talk to people, but I have no need to defend it. If somebody says, I just don't see it that way, I go, well, fine. How do you see it? I'm curious. And that's fine. They're welcome to see it any way they want to. So what? It really doesn't mean anything, permanent. It's just a form of self-expression. So, what we want to look for is the beautiful feeling behind it, the powerful quality and capacity that we have to think and to think again and to see our thinking differently.